Would you like to learn a brand new and innovative way to invest your extra money that has a low barrier to entry and low competition? What if I told you that it is a guaranteed method to get up to 18 to 20% return on your investment? Tax lien and deed purchasing is the only way to get into the real estate market through the back door. No credit and no loans needed. This method isn't commonly taught, and therefore the competition is very low, for now. Put together a 14-hour info-packed course which will teach you everything you'll need to know to get started. Learn at your own pace, step-by-step guided video and aids to start you on the TLC deed investment process. The course offers many learning tools for new investors, helping ensure you safely invest in tax liens and deeds. Contact us today and join the buyback team.
Blessings, blessings, blessings. I hope you guys are doing well. You're doing well. You're here with Lashley, and we're here today. And we're going to be going into a little bit of what's going on with Silicon Valley. Please bear with me. Just trying to make sure that everything is good. Good. All right. Yes, we are great. We are great. So, what we're going to be doing today is we're just going to be going over a little bit of what's happening with Silicon Valley Bank collapse, takeover, and fallout, whatever they want to categorize this as. And we're going to talk a little bit about the housing market. But before we do that, we're going to take the first half an hour of this broadcast to do a flashback. And this flashback is going to consist of us getting an understanding of the actual money system. A lot of people really believe that they understand the foundations of the American money system, but we have to understand that first to understand what happened with Silicon Valley, what happened, what is actually a bank run, and what we can possibly expect. So all of this is for information and educational purposes only. Before we get into deep subject matter, we do want to take a flash from the past. So what we're going to be showing you is a video from Secure Your Energy page, and this is the European money system, the foundation. And this is something that I find very important. So the first full half an hour of this broadcast, we will be going over history.
One day, Europe was attacked from inside, and a Europe which had become Christian suddenly lost its Christianity. While Europe was Christian for those centuries, Christian Europe fought a ferocious battle against riba. Yeah, Christian Europe against riba. In fact, one of the best books on riba ever written was written by a British sheikh. What was his name? Shakespeare, correct. William Shakespeare. Which book? Which book? Merchant of Venice. Merchant of Venice. I will not have the time in this lecture, otherwise you have to give me 3 hours, to explain to you the brilliance of William Shakespeare in Merchant of Venice. But you'll get it, that analysis is there in my big book on riba. In Merchant of Venice, you'll see Christian Europe in its attempt to ensure the prohibition of riba. There is another book, not as famous as William Shakespeare's, but this one is also a classic. Take a note of it. You might want to search for it in the library. The name of the book is Religion and the Rise of Capitalism. I would make this compulsory reading in Darul Uloom. Oh yes. Religion and the Rise of Capitalism by an author whose name is R.W. Tawney, T-A-W-N-E-Y. And in this book, Tawney records the Christians' struggle against riba in Europe. But when the French Revolution occurred, the back of the Christian church was broken in Western Europe. And when was it broken in Eastern Europe? Which revolution? Bolshevik Revolution. How come we're only getting the answers from this corner? The Bolshevik Revolution broke the back of the Christian church in Eastern Europe, in Russia. When once the back of the Christian church was broken in Europe, the Jews were delighted. The Jews were delighted. Because the Christians had been waging a terrific war against the Jews for centuries in Europe. We will not allow you to lend money on interest. And the Jews always wanted to lend money on interest. Why? Because they had changed the Torah. I think I explained this to you. They rewrote the Torah. The Torah that had come down from Allah had prohibited riba. But they changed it, and the Torah now says, in as many words, that it is haram for a Jew to lend money on interest to another Jew. But it is halal, he can lend on interest to those who are not Jews. Go and check it out. Go and check it out in Deuteronomy, in Leviticus. Go and check it out. I have all of these quotations in my book for you. So they are the money lenders. They changed the word of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responded to this in the Quran and points out that they had in effect changed the Torah. Where did he do that? Suratun? Which surah? Suratun Nisa. The language, as I said, was very powerful language. فَبِظُلْمٍ مِّنَ الَّذِينَ هَادُوا حَرَّمْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ طَيِّبَاتٍ أُحِلَّتْ لَهُمْ. In that ayah, he says, وَأَخْذِهِمُ الرِّبَا وَقَدْ نُهُوا عَنْهُ. They were taking riba despite the fact that they had been prohibited from doing so. So this is how we know that they changed the Torah. Now, with the French Revolution, an economy based on riba emerges in Europe for the first time. And then with the Bolshevik Revolution in Eastern Europe, the possibility for Eastern Europe to be embraced by riba is also now open. But the banks in Europe, they don't just lend money on interest. The European economy not only produces this curious creature called a bank, the bank does something more than lending money on interest. What the bank does, and this began in France with an Englishman, what the bank does is to start issuing paper as money. Paper as money. And then when government saw that the banks were getting rich issuing paper as money, then the governments took over the paper. Then Europe sent her armies, and European armies shamelessly, at the point of a sword, those who say Islam was spread at the point of the sword, they're the ones who went with the point of the sword and conquered the rest of the non-European world. And so a white world order emerges at the point of the sword in which Europe now rules the world. When Europe took over the rest of the world, one of the most important things that Europe wanted to do was to dismantle the system of real money and replace it with paper money. And they achieved it because the scholars of Islam were eating halwa. Europe would not decolonize and hand over Egypt to Muhammad Naguib and Jamal Abdel Nasser for the drums to be beaten. We are independent. And would not hand over Indonesia to a fellow named Ahmad Sukarno so the Indonesians can jump for joy. We are independent now. And they would not hand over Malaysia to a fellow named Tunku Abdul Rahman. And they would not hand over Pakistan to another fellow named Muhammad Ali Jinnah, etc., 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 etc. And all the natives start dancing, drum beating. We have something called independence. While Europe is laughing its head behind the wall. Look at them, blind like bats. Europe would not decolonize until Europe was ensured that a new financial system was in place in which real money was now replaced by paper money. At the beginning, when paper money was introduced, it was redeemable for gold. What does redeemable mean? Yes, exchange. In the United States of America, until the 1920s, you could take 20 US dollars in notes paper and go to any bank and you can ask for 1 ounce of gold and you'll get it. If a man wants to cut your throat, he won't be so silly as to show you the sword, the knife. He has to hide the knife first, all right? Get you to come close. So when paper money was introduced, it was redeemable in gold. And the banks that issued the paper money and the governments that issued the paper money, they gave their word that this is the value of the paper. And they even print on the paper, guess what they printed? In God we trust. Let me show you. Here is a US dollar note, and you can come and see it with your own eyes if you want. It says, in God we trust. In other words, when we give our word to you that 20 American dollars is equivalent to 1 ounce of gold, our word is as good and as solid as the word of God himself. But in 1933, something strange happened that should have caused our ulama to stop eating halwa. Uncle Sam was broke. So guess what Uncle Sam did? Uncle Sam was broke. So guess what Uncle Sam did? In April 1933, Uncle Sam enacted legislation prohibiting all Americans from keeping gold. You have to return any gold that you have, not jewelry. Jewelry you can keep. Any gold that you have as coins or as bullion to Uncle Sam, and he will give you paper. And you have to trust in God that Uncle Sam's word is as good as the word of God. So all of America gave their gold to Uncle Sam, meaning the US government. If they caught you with gold after a certain date, then you could be fined 10,000 US dollars and spend 6 months as a guest of Uncle Sam in one of his prisons. So all of America went and gave their gold and took the paper. After Uncle Sam had collected all the gold, guess what he did? He gave his word, but he changed his word. This is called values. These are the people who today rule the world. They gave their word, And they broke their word. Uncle Sam changed the price of gold from $20 an ounce of gold to $35 an ounce of gold. Huh? The American people woke up that morning and said, our own government ripped us off. Yes, it was your own government that ripped you off. And then Uncle Sam made it known, you better come back and buy your gold quick before I change the price again. So the American people had to go and buy back their gold from Uncle Sam at $35 an ounce. And in the process, Uncle Sam ripped off the American people of almost half of their wealth. The Prophet said, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, this transaction is one based on deception, through which you get a profit to which you are not entitled. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam described this as riba. How is it taking place? They started with gold paper being redeemable in gold. And then came 1933, when we should have woken up to see their game, but we didn't wake up. So in 1944, at the end of the Second World War, they now consolidated the system in the creation of an international monetary system now. Consolidated. The new international monetary system emerges out of the Bretton Woods Agreement in upstate New York. Is it taught in the Darul Room? No, it's not. At Bretton Woods, what did they do? They said, no longer will paper be redeemable in gold. Only one paper will be chosen to be redeemable in gold. All the rest will not. The one paper which was chosen was the US dollar. So the US dollar will be redeemable in gold, but not sterling pound, and not Pakistani rupee, and not Indonesian rupiah, not Australian dollar. No, only one. So this is a major blow to the integrity of money. The second thing that they did was to declare that the only people who could come to Uncle Sam to redeem their paper for gold are governments. You and I can't do it, only governments, only central banks. So now the entire system has lost 99% of its integrity. It has only 1% left of integrity, but those fellows are still eating halwa. 1% integrity left. That governments, central banks can go to Uncle Sam with their US dollars and demand the gold. Nobody did. From 1944 to 1971, nobody did. The Vietnam War took place in the late 60s, and Uncle Sam printed a lot of paper to finance the war. And Uncle Sam didn't have the gold to back that paper. At Bretton Woods, they had fixed the price of gold at $35 an ounce. Fixed. It is there in the Bretton Woods Accord. Uncle Sam didn't have the gold to back all that paper. So in September 1971, the British government came in one Friday evening, perhaps, with $3 billion and said, Uncle Sam, we want the gold. Uncle Sam knew that the game was up. The game was up. Because come Monday morning, guess who is going to be at the front of the line? Saudi Arabia. Or who behind Saudi Arabia? Kuwait. Huh? And a whole long line of people, of government, central banks, we want the gold. So Richard Nixon retired to Camp David. And then on Sunday, he had addressed the American people. And he said, we gave our word, but we don't have to keep our word. We gave our word, but we don't have to keep our word. We will no longer honor our obligation under Bretton Woods to redeem paper for gold from central banks. And so since September 1971, this may be news for some of you who've been eating halwa. Since September 1971, there is no legal link between paper and gold.
They send men here to rob us, so work and strive for money. Money is power. Money is the only weapon that the Jew has to defend himself with.
If you guys want to see that video again, I'm going to put the link in the description. That's actually located on our Secure Your Energy page, where we made this video or put the compilation of this video together to start to get an understanding of how the money system actually came about and how it was disconnected from gold and how interest is occurred. So this particular video gave you a deep understanding of how interest started from a religious aspect as well as from a nation aspect. Then it went on to talk about the price of gold and how it was set in the Bretton Woods agreement and how that agreement wasn't upheld in many other situations. Now, I want to keep this going because I want to make the history part a little bit short. We do have 2 more bits of history that we want to go over with you pertaining to what is money and understanding the real concept of it so you can understand how we actually got to where we're at. Because I know you hear people complaining about how much money is being printed, how much money, and people don't understand how that can actually damage our economy. So understanding these concepts is going to help you, okay?
We may never know for what combination of reasons President John F. Kennedy was assassinated, but the one thing that ties the 35th president to the 16th and the 25th is that they all realized the plague that is the debt-based system of money under the control of private banking and how it was and is a detrimental force to the health of the nation. And whether by sheer coincidence or by calculated intrigue, they all lost their lives to an assassin's bullet. And it is into this zone that President Donald Trump has placed himself with his recent honest description of the Federal Reserve, the unelected and unaccountable body that creates the nation's money supply out of nothing, as having gone crazy. The question now is, will President Trump act on his words and his obvious knowledge that the modern banking system and the Federal Reserve in particular is not only sinister, but inimical to freedom? For if he does, he will most certainly enter the same assassination zone as Abraham Lincoln, William McKinley, and John F. Kennedy.
Cost Plus World Market has affordable furniture for your holiday festivities. Extra chairs for extra guests. Tables fit for...
Not long after his Den of Vipers declaration, Jackson told his vice president, "The bank, Mr. Van Buren, is trying to kill me." Whenever asked about what he considered his greatest accomplishment, Andrew Jackson always replied, "I killed the bank." And perhaps by providence, he may have been the nation's first assassinated president, but for the fact that both pistols wielded by his assassin backfired. I've spoken at length of Jackson breaking the private banking cartel in the 19th century when he vetoed the renewal of the charter for the Second Bank of the United States in July 1832. Moreover, of the nebulous way privately controlled central banks manipulate the creation of money for their own monstrous greed. Links for these more fleshed out videos are in the description. But to summarize for the sake of brevity, you must understand that central banks have always sought to prohibit governments from paying off their debts and being debt-free. This, of course, is impossible in the connected system of debt and money under fractional reserve banking. Even more so, global banking cartels seek to quash any would-be government that chooses to print and furnish its own money supply without cost or debt. For Christians listening, this means usury. The point of this presentation is not to weave a web of conspiracy with regards to long-dead presidents and their assassinations. It's only to connect the dots on private institutions that control the money supply and those that have challenged them in word and deed. And there have been 8 U.S. presidents that openly have opposed having a privately held central bank, with several of them coming to violent ends. Abraham Lincoln was the first American president to be assassinated, and it was he that refused to pay the 24 to 36% interest that private banks demanded to finance the war between states, as he refused to plunge the country into a debt that would be perilous to repay. Lincoln was able to get Congress to pass a law that authorized the printing of full legal tender treasury notes to pay for the war effort. Of this, he said, "We gave the people of this republic the greatest blessing they have ever had, their own paper money to pay their own debts." In a side note of trivia, these treasury notes were printed with green ink on the back, and thus the people called them greenbacks, hence the name we derive to this day. Lincoln printed $400 million worth of greenbacks, money that he delegated to be created, a debt-free and interest-free money to finance the war. It served as legal tender for all debts, public and private. He printed it, paid it to his soldiers, to the U.S. civil service employees, and he also bought supplies for war. He was assassinated shortly after the war ended. Thereafter, Congress revoked the Greenback Law and enacted in its place the National Banking Act. The national banks were to be privately owned, and the national banknotes they issued were to be interest-bearing. The act also provided that the greenbacks should be retired from circulation as soon as they came back to the Treasury in payment of taxes. The 25th president, William McKinley, began his attack against the banking cartels with his Secretary of State, John Sherman. They used the Sherman Antitrust Act against the J.P. Morgan financial empire, known at the time as the Northern Trust, which by the late 1800s owned nearly all of America's railroads. Shortly after President McKinley began attacking the central bankers, he was assassinated in 1901, allowing his vice president, Theodore Roosevelt, to take power. Upon office, one of his first acts was to drop the United States government lawsuits against the Northern Trust. While, of course, having several critics, it has been argued that by issuing Executive Order 1110, President John F. Kennedy was trying to rein in the power of the Federal Reserve by authorizing the U.S. Treasury to issue United States notes, which were created by the U.S. government directly and not by the Federal Reserve. 5 months later, on the 22nd of November, 1963, President Kennedy was brutally assassinated in Dallas, Texas. The name Federal Reserve Bank was designed to deceive, and it still does. It's not federal, nor is it owned by the government. It's privately owned. It pays its own postage like any other corporation. Its employees are not civil service. Its physical property is held under private deeds and is subject to local taxation. Government property, as you know, is not. The regional Federal Reserve banks issue shares of stock to the member banks that own them. 100% of the shareholders of the Federal Reserve are private banks. The U.S. government owns 0 shares. While the actual owners of the Federal Reserve, the people themselves, are unknown, as stated, the Federal Reserve is still essentially owned by the member banks, and how the 6% profit the Federal Reserve takes is dispatched is also unknown. If you look at a U.S. dollar, it actually says Federal Reserve note on the top. In the financial world, a note is an instrument of debt. And to the credit of the banking cartels that control the Federal Reserve, it is an engine that has provided private wealth that is almost unimaginable, even to the most financially sophisticated. It has enabled an elite to manipulate the economy for its own agenda and enlisted the government itself as its enforcer. It controls the times, dictates business, and affects almost every aspect of life for the citizens of nations under their control, if not equally but more so than the political class, just via means of stealth. Ron Paul once astutely observed that it is actually about as Federal Express is. The Federal Reserve must be understood as an unelected cabal of central bankers, and thankfully, many in the American population are beginning to wake up and realize this. And President Trump, who for now tepidly has begun to attack the Federal Reserve and in particular its chairman Jerome Powell of endangering the U.S. economy by raising interest rates. He said, "I'm just saying this, I'm very unhappy with the Fed because Obama had zero interest rates." And he said this to the Wall Street Journal on Tuesday, that every time we do something great, he raises the interest rates. On another occasion, he attacked the Fed by
We're going to stop this video right here because he gets the Pentagon. I love them. You go onto their YouTube page. This was a video that I re-uploaded like 4 years ago, but I'm reiterating the information in this video so people can understand the changes of the actual money system and who actually is in charge of our banking system. So now that we know that an international monetary fund, which is controlled by a Federal Reserve System, which is not a federal system, but a private company, we need to understand how this is directly connected to the smaller banks, the banks that you see every day. Not JP Morgan, because they're just right under the Federal Reserve, but I'm talking about Bank of America, because they're a little bit smaller than JP Morgan. We're talking about Silicon Valley, these type of banks. So now what we're going to do is move on into what people were saying was the actual alleged cause of Silicon Valley issue. And what they stated was that specifically it was a bank run. Now, do we know what a bank run is? Anybody? Anybody? So what we do here is share credible resources with you to make sure that the buyback team and everyone else who happens to come across this video is able to really get factual information. So we have information brought to you by Duke University, in which they go over the concept of understanding what a bank run is. It's about a 5-minute little breakdown, but I think it's very important to learn from a higher level institution. Take this information and take out what you need from it and add it on to what you know and what you're going to continue to grow to learn on. Because we need to understand what's going on with these banking services, because the banks and the lenders are directly connected to the housing market.
This is Duke University.
I know I'm a geek.
So bank runs have been important, historically and currently. So when we think of bank runs, we normally think of long queues of customers standing outside a bank, and we associate this with the Great Depression. That's changed, unfortunately. In recent times, we've seen plenty of bank runs. So in the US, Countrywide and IndyMac. In the UK, Northern Rock. In India, ICICI Bank. And so bank runs have become a very topical issue, right? And one of the things that's important to understand is what are the factors that propel a bank run? So what's intriguing about bank runs is even a very healthy bank can face a bank run if people think that other people are going to run. In this paper, we try to figure out what are the factors that induce depositors to run and what are the factors that sort of hold them back. And so we got data from a bank which faced a run. Now, this bank itself was perfectly healthy, but its neighboring bank faced a run. And so for 3 days, there was a major run on this bank too. And we have minute by minute sort of withdrawal data from this bank. And so we can try and figure out what are the factors that actually propel depositors to run or hold them back. And so if you were to just plot on Google Earth the depositors who run in relationship to where the bank is, you actually see some interesting patterns. So in the picture, the round dots represent households who run. And what you can see is that in a single apartment, there are often 3 households that run, but in the neighboring apartment building, there's nobody that runs. So this suggests that there are systematic factors affecting bank runs. The question is, what are they? And so the way we study this is we examine what we call a contagion effect of a bank run, in a way very similar to the way the epidemiologists sort of study how do infectious diseases spread, and they compute transmission probabilities. So we do the same in the bank run setting, and asking, if someone in my social network runs, am I more likely to get infected in the sense of also going to the bank and running? And we find social networks are indeed important, but perhaps even more important are what are the factors that hold you back from running? And we find deposit insurance matters, and so that's good news. We would hope deposit insurance does stop people from running. It does, but it's only partially effective. The other factors we find that are important in holding depositors back from running are the length and the depth of their relationship with the bank. So the longer they've been with the bank, the less likely they are to run, and the more contact they have with the bank, right? In this case, if you've ever taken a loan out with the bank, either in the past or currently, you're less likely to run, right? And so there's something about the relationship or the connectedness of the depositor with the bank that sort of stops people from running, even if there are other people in your social network running, right? Then finally, one of the questions we ask is, are there long-term costs of a healthy bank facing a run, even if the bank survives? Now, this is important from a regulatory perspective, because if a bank faces a run and you figure it is going to survive, and that is certainly the case in this bank, right? So it faces runs for 3 days, there's no intervention, and it survives. So what are the costs, or are there any costs to this? Should the government intervene when the bank is likely to survive anyway? And so when we look at this bank, we measure who are the depositors who run, do they ever come back to the bank? And the answer is no, they don't. So there are long-term costs of a bank run.
What I'm going to do is break down my perspective of what we just saw and heard from Duke University. I'm a little disappointed, and the reason why I'm disappointed because they did not pick out other factors that can cause bank runs. Basically, you can see them blaming us, blaming the people who have the accounts in, and basically blaming how can they say, the perception of the market, as you see, as they talked about what is socially being talked about. And I feel like that is half information, and that is not right, because a bank run can happen before everybody takes their money out. A bank run can happen when a few people take their money out and the bank does not have sufficient funds to satisfy the people removing their money. Okay. So what happens is what they say. You will have the governments to come in and increase the amount of assurance, because that's some of the things we're going to talk about today, of what they're talking about with Silicon Valley, how, all accounts are protected by $250,000 FIC. I'm saying it FICH, I think. Insurance. I am misquoting that type of insurance, but you know what I'm saying. So basically, they're saying even a small bank and the big banks have a cap of $250,000. And what she was saying is that is one of the ways to make consumers feel that the market is secure. But that is a perception, because as what we learned, the foundations of money is that we have to have something that's an asset that's connected to it. At one point, it was gold, and we didn't go into the petrodollar. But right now, America is pretty much guaranteed on the petrodollar and having the control of gold being cashed in only American currency. Okay, so that's how they have a hold on the market as far as value. But when you have other countries who want to create their own gold backed currency, that's when other things happen. I'm not going to go off into that, but it seems like those countries who want to do that always seem to have a dictator and we go into war with them. Hint, hint, hint. I'm just going to throw that out there. So this is how, if you could see throughout history, through, I'm going to say it honestly, through ways of strong armament by sword, that certain positions are held. But at this point, what they said is that initially when the first bank run went, everybody was like, oh my God, the system is collapsing, this, that, and the third. But if you listen closely to the videos that we showed, what happens when we have a government that does not bail out the banks who actually have a bank run, which means in all perspective that the withdrawals amount is more than what the bank had. Now, this is where I'm a little disappointed, as I told you, in Duke University, because they didn't talk about the factors that caused the bank not to have that money. It can be high interest rate from the feds. It can be an influx of inflation in that particular area. It can be an issue of not having enough customers participating in their banking services and things. But that is a percentage, but that's not the big percentage. So I want us to get an idea of what a bank run is in real perspective, as well as the foundations of the money system, and how if we continue, as we've been doing, inflating the currency, it leads to this. And it has continued to lead to this over the years. But the only reason why people say, well, this is normal, because the governments has come in and bailed out the banks. But allegedly, every time, now we're going to replay these videos, every time the United States tried to create their own currency that's outside of the Federal Reserve currency, somebody is not alive. And we're going to just move on with that. Yeah, that's something to think about. Please listen to the first 30 minutes of this again, because you have to put the whole perspective together so we can look at the system on a macro level, not micro level. Okay, they keep us looking at it like this. No, let's put all the pieces together. Okay, so I'm a little disappointed in Duke University with giving us half information. I thought she was about to get it in, and she really didn't. So now we just one more video. This one is about 6 years ago. It's bank runs explained in 1 minute. Let's make this make sense. I do like this 1 minute economic platform. This is just for information, educational purposes only. This video is not monetized, and anybody who I share, if they come in and put copyrights, I don't mind, because I need the buyback team to understand what's going on and the general public. And once we put everybody content together and we talk about it in a subject matter, it makes more sense, because we're seeing things sectionated. We have a lot of experts, but they are focused on sectionated information. And me, I like to look at things like a system. So let's play this video, okay? Another great content creator.
As mentioned in the fractional reserve banking video, only a fraction of the currency in existence is actually tangible, so paper money and coins. Let's assume that Bank A, like any other bank, has customers who trust it with their money for various reasons. Some create bank deposits, some simply keep some spending money in their bank accounts, and so on. These people are legally allowed to go to the bank and take their currency out in the form of paper money. The problem is that most of the currency banks manage doesn't exist physically. For the sake of our discussion, we'll assume 10% of the currency Bank A manages is tangible, and we'll also assume it actually keeps that paper money in a vault. If 2 out of 100 customers ask for physical money, the bank can handle it. But what if 20 out of 100 people do it? Naturally, the bank would become insolvent. It just doesn't have that much physical currency. To make matters worse, the depositors would panic and spread the word, causing a bank run, which is kind of like an infection. As more people find out a bank is in trouble, they tell others, and this might make depositors stop trusting banks in general. Even seemingly healthy banks can be affected because, again, most of their money is not physical. Therefore, governments and central banks do their best to keep depositors at ease. In some places like the US or the European Union, bank deposits are guaranteed up until a certain amount, but that is a topic for another video.
Sharon Stone, the iconic actress known for her role in Basic Instinct, recently made a heartfelt speech at the Women's Cancer Research Fund's WCRF fundraiser. While accepting the Courage Award, she shared that she had lost half of her fortune in what she referred to as the banking thing that occurred recently, presumably referring to the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank. I know that thing that you have to get on and figure out how to text the money is difficult. I'm a technical idiot, but I can write a F King check, she said, emphasizing the importance of taking action even if it's not easy. Stone's emotional speech followed the SVB collapse and stock market volatility. Although the actress did not provide any further details, the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation shut down SVB after it reported taking a $1.8 billion hit from a $21 billion fire sale of its bond holdings. Despite the loss of her money and the recent death of her brother, Stone encouraged others to stand up and value their lives. This is not an easy time for any of us, she shared. This is a hard time in the world, but I'm telling you what, I'm not having some politician tell me what I can and cannot do. Stone's speech was made at the Women's Cancer Research Fund's Unforgettable Evening Benefit Gala in Beverly Hills. Rebel Wilson, Nia Vardalos, Rachel Zoe, Lisa Rinna, and Harry Hamlin, Julianne Hough and Cord Overstreet were among those who attended. Stone herself underwent surgery in 2001 to remove benign tumors that were larger than her breast alone. She also spoke about receiving a misdiagnosis in November, which turned out to be a large fibroid tumor that required surgery. Despite her struggles, Stone continues to inspire others to have courage and stand up for what they believe in, even when the going gets tough. As she said, stand up and say what you're worth. I dare you. That's what courage is.
Oh, I'm going to send a lot of love and blessings to Sharon Stone because obviously she is going through it. And this is a real live situation where someone was allegedly, and it's not alleged, she came out and said that she lost a good percentage of her money. She's talking about half of her money. Now, I don't know how it was invested in the business, things like that. But right now, we have to know that this is real. Okay. And there are people being affected by this. So I happened to find this and I was like, wow, let me share this with the family because it needs to bring this to life. A lot of people don't believe things until a star goes through it. Okay. So that's Sharon Stone. And she most recently said that she was affected by the Silicon Valley bankruptcy. So let's go into a little bit of what CBS News have to say about the explanation of why Silicon Valley is in the situation they're in, so we can get a better understanding of what's happening now, allegedly, and let's corresponds that with all of the information that we, reviewed at the beginning of this live. Okay, let's make it make sense.
And we begin this hour with what is major financial news. The former parent company of Silicon Valley Bank is now filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy.
SVB Financial is now separate from the bank following its takeover by the FDIC.
Now, this filing comes just a week after regulators shut down the bank after a run on the financial institution. This was the second biggest bank failure in U.S. history.
CBS News Money Watch reporter Christopher Brooks joins us now here in studio. Christopher, welcome. So what does this bankruptcy filing mean for the future of Silicon Valley Bank's former parent company?
Well, we don't actually have the direct answer to that, but if I were to give an educated guess, I would say it's probably lining itself up for a potential sale. And even this morning, when SVB Financial announced their bankruptcy filing, they sort of hinted at that in the news release, saying they're exploring all these strategic options for the assets that they have. And typically, when companies file for bankruptcies, one of the reasons they do that is so that they can preserve the assets that they have and so that they look more attractive to a potential new buyer. So I think if it was an educated guess, I would say probably a sale, but I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. We don't know for sure.
And to the average viewer, this might be confusing because the former bank, its executives were, they got the fire from the government. They got the punishments. They lost their money. They're being investigated by a lot of financial firms. The new or current SVB is a bridge bank, encouraging people to bring in money because those loans are protected. Just help us understand the difference between what was SVB and what exists now.
Absolutely. So what we knew, I guess, earlier this year to be SVB technically doesn't exist anymore. So that went away when the FDIC completely took it over. And on paper, that is an entity that just vanished. The bridge bank is that new bank that exists in place of SVB. And that's the bank that the federal government and everybody in the banking system is saying, that's okay. Your money is set there. If you want to deposit or withdraw money as a customer, as an investor, all that is fine. So it's two separate entities that sort of have the same name, but that's the reason why there's some of that confusion, because under SVB Financial, it was Silicon Valley Bank, but from the collapse, it was taken over by federal regulators.
And just as a follow-up, SVB Financial now being sued by shareholders, does this bankruptcy in any way protect them from that?
It'll delay it. It won't completely protect the firm, but when you're under bankruptcy, you can't go through any of those legal proceedings. The bankruptcy process has to go through first. So it doesn't take it away, but it'll definitely elongate those proceedings because bankruptcy has to come first.
Interesting. Let's talk about First Republic. So 11 major U.S. banks announced a $30 billion rescue package for First Republic Bank. What impact could that have when it comes to confidence in the U.S. banking system?
Right. Well, I sort of think of confidence in two different buckets, right? The bucket of the everyday customer, the person who goes in and deposits or withdraws money, and then the confidence of the investor, the person who actually invests in that company. So for the customer, for the everyday customer, I think that $30 billion will really, really give them strong confidence in this company and that their assets will be okay. And investors, they're a different type of person, right? Like the confidence that they're looking for isn't so much of, can I actually get my money out of an ATM? They're going to be looking for changes on that balance sheet that makes them more confident. I mean, one of the things that really concerned investors about SVB was that it had a ton of unsecured deposits. It had some unrealized losses on its books. And, to some degree, not as much as SVB, but First Republic had some of those same problems, right? So if you were an investor in that type of bank, you're like, I want to see some holistic top-down changes so that you don't look as much as SVB before I'm confident in investing in this company going forward.
Yeah, that's a really good point. A lot of people criticize the VCs who are too aggressive and too ambitious in returns for why some of this happened in the first place. Christopher Brooks, great to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Am I silent now? I didn't. When I was talking, I was silent. I do apologize, guys. I hope I was not silent when I was talking. If you guys can hear me, right here. Do apologize. Now, let's just go over what they said and what I think I'm hearing. I always got to think to the left. And for the takeover bank name to be remarkably similar to the first bank, and they're saying that is confusing people, it would confuse people. And this is just I'm just talking. This is not what happened. But sometimes companies, like you said, go bankrupt to allegedly hold their assets of what they have to be able to sell. Now, this is sound like what's happening, but in the aspect of banking, who owns the new bank? Is the bank being regulated by a private institution or it's going to be a government institution? That says two things to me. That says that we have a problem. One, we have private banking institutions that may not be regulated properly, most likely not, and are doing these things and causing these repetitive bank fails. That's a problem. The second thing it says to me, do we need to have the government as our bank? And Americans really do believe that the Federal Reserve is federal and it's government owned. It's not. Now, if we have a government that's in place that is for the people and for correcting the system, I would think that it is a benefit to have more than just a watchdog regulatory system, but literally have percentage of these banks owned by the government, because it seems like they end up coming and bailing them out anyway and just giving them free money to go back and be private institutions and possibly do this again. Because what some business owners do is when they're doing bad with their business, they will file bankruptcy and literally create a whole nother business under the same guise with just a slightly named difference. And I'm going to turn my head this way. And the reason why is because you heard what they said. They said that some people are confused. Y'all can't hear me, right? You can hear me, G? Some people are confused, like, okay, which bank is taking over? Is the old bank? Which one is insured? What it sounds like to me is that the books was cleared. And there may be the same players that may be involved in the new bank. Allegedly. That's just what I'm feeling from what I'm reading and how I, have an idea how big corporations move, because they don't dissolve. They probably get dissolved into a bigger company and expand. But these companies are not liquidating fast. They're finding partnerships so they can continue their franchise. Like, for instance, I believe it was AT&T. Who was it? It was Verizon and Sprint that got together, right? Because Sprint was having issues. So instead of Sprint losing its total business, total equity and everything, they merged. Think about that, guys. Think about that. I just want us to look at that, because I want consumers to have confidence in the banking system, but we have to be realistic. I'm going to stop because this page is clean and I don't want to get restricted. I'm already, some of the things I say makes YouTube very uncomfortable because I have a free mind, meaning if I have to do everything myself, like catch rainwater, boil it, put a little bleach, live next to a well, that's the type of person I'll be. I know I look cute, cutie wooty, but I can go in and go and live. So people like us, we look at things differently. We look at it more from a freedom aspect and how it would actually impinge on our way we maneuver in economy. That's why I said, okay, the private companies are not being regulated properly. But if we have half of the government in there and the government is not for the people and they owning these banks, how are we going to do well in this situation? That's how I'm looking at it. How are we going to benefit from this right now? and I'm not really seeing the benefit. Do you? Anybody? Anybody? Now, I want to show you one more thing before we get off of this live, because this is how propaganda works. Allegedly. I happen to go to 2 articles from 2 different news sources. I don't know if these 2 news sources just merge, just like I told you, they do sometimes. But it's just so weird that this same video will be circulating, and it's like, this is the pump. This okay. Now, if something happened, like a car accident, of course that video is going to be circulating on all different broadcasts. But if you have somebody has commentary about their perspective on the economy, why is that the main thing that's circulating? So I end up finding this young lady's opinion about basically what she says, fact checker. This is fact checker. So this is US Today that used this video I'm going to show you, as well as another news broadcast. And I'm just like, why do you do this? Why do you make yourself so obvious? At least have somebody else saying something a little different. So this one is from USA Today, and this is why the Silicon Valley collapsed. Here's what we need to know. So this is a fact checker video. False claims Silicon Valley first massive bank collapse this century. Let's listen to this 2-minute video. Let's see, can we get? I don't hear it.
Within near days of each. Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank both collapsed within near days of each other, and now there's fears that more are going to close. Silicon Valley Bank is a bank based in Silicon Valley, and they specialize in working with venture capital companies and a lot of tech companies in the area. It's a smaller bank. And for banks at the basic level, if we all want our deposits at the same time, that's really difficult because they're lending out some of that money at any given point. So when a couple people say, I want my money, they should be able to give it to them without an issue. But again, when everyone starts coming in and saying, I need it, they can't guarantee that. And that's what we saw happening with Silicon Valley Bank. When one domino falls in the banking industry, it doesn't just fall alone. It raises fear, and there's this whole contagion effect that could happen, which is what we're seeing right now. Signature Bank, the other one that failed after Silicon Valley Bank, they blamed them. They said if that didn't happen, it's unlikely that they would have collapsed. So regional banks, I wouldn't say that all of them are in bad circumstances right now, but I think people should really take a good hard look at, is their money insured, and kind of do their homework on where their bank was standing before this crisis. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, a branch of the government, that was made actually after the Great Depression to kind of restore confidence in the banking system. They're working on behalf of depositors to get as much money as possible to people who weren't able to take it out in time. But I think there's also going to be discussions of changing banking regulations. Under the Trump administration, some regulations were loosened, and now there's calls to tighten again, going back to kind of these 2008 standards where banks were put on a much tighter leash.
Thank you. Okay, so this was USA Today, and I'm just going to show you another video. It's the same video, but I'm not going to show you the video, but how they spread the same concept over and over. This one is brought to you by Yahoo News. So I just want to show y'all some of the things what she was saying was I can definitely roll with it. She said this may spark them to do regulatory changes and increase the regulatory guidelines that was released when Trump was in the office, and this is what we talked about. You remember when I told you that the Consumer Protection Bureau was something that was established around 2008, not established, but it got more funding and more regulatory power over contracts, over real estate lending, over consumer protection. So what ended up happening under these new guidelines that was put under the Dodd-Frank Act under Obama to regulatory the banks and all of these big companies. When Trump came in, he said that he was going to give his friends a break. And that's what he did. So he defunded a lot of these regulatory programs that was there, pulling back on watchdog programs as well as changing some regularization that allowed these banks to start moving freely and doing the dumb stuff again. Now, this one is not specifically related to the housing market like in 2008, but it is related to the unregulatory practice of money being printed continuously, the inflation being, well, actually, we're going to talk about the Feds. They put the interest rate all the way to zero, which made a whole bunch of rich investors run to get these type of loans because we don't get loans from the Feds. Those banks, the ones that just fell, gets the loans from the Feds. Do you see what I'm saying? So when they fell, the government is paying the Feds back this money. And we know the Feds is not the federal government. It is the Federal Reserve. Does that make sense? Okay. So, do we need regulatory change? You're daggone right. Do we need private companies being able to open banks and things like that? I really do think we do, because you should be able to start a bank. I should be able to start a bank if we have the funding. But the way things are set up right now, the average person cannot, but it still should be an opportunity. But because this is, as we talk about, allegedly a society which is supposed to be under a democracy, and we all supposed to live in harmony or have common human basic rights, this should also entail how money is regulated and how these big companies participate with us as citizens. And doing these things like being able to basically not have enough money as a business to sustain your customers should be illegal. It just doesn't make sense to me, because if I said I had a service for my customers and I did not have enough to provide the whatever it was, the asset, the toy, whatever it was, these people will come after me for fraud, for false advertisement. Would they not? Would they not? So it just baffles me. I'm just asking these questions that make people feel uncomfortable. It just baffles me, how can a big company like a bank can have so much obligations to their customers as far as monetary money that the customers put in, and you just lending out more than what you got. One of the reasons, allegedly. And they're not responsible for damages and false advertisement. And they literally now is putting it back on the consumer, because we're going to just go and close this up. They're putting it back on us, the consumers, to say, hey, don't be afraid. Believe in it. Even if it crashed, we got you. We got you. Even if it just mess up again, we got you. So just come on and make some more deposits, because they said they're depending on the deposits of the people so other people can make withdrawals. Yeah. I don't know. Does that make sense, guys? That's why I ask these questions, because to me, it seems like economically we live in a backwards world. I mean, I'm just gonna have to say it. That's why we teach about primetime home buyers and how to invest in tax liens and tax deeds, because of the economy seeming so predatory. And people getting caught up in these bad situations in home mortgages they can't pay for, predatory lending practices. This is why we teach the things we teach. We go over the things we do. We highlight the content we do, so you can start to think out the box, so you can look at your specific situation to see how all of the stuff we talk about applies to you and how you can use it. Okay? So I'm not going to drag this subject matter out because we're an hour in, and I think I got a lot of like key information in for people to think about, because we forgot all about that. We forgot about all the foundations of money, all the separation of gold, all how it's connected to the petrodollar, all how basically allegedly wars are connected to other countries wanting to make their money connected to gold. But I'm gonna just shut up because y'all know right now gold cannot be bought unless it's converted into American money. So we found out about that. We went over also how it was solidified that American people were not able to have gold, and it was separated by the Bretton Woods Agreement, and then that agreement wasn't honored because in the Bretton Woods Agreement, the gold prices was set at a certain price. So once they started fluctuating, they say, "Hey, y'all better come and get your gold back. Y'all better come buy with the paper money." So you want the people to have confidence in all of that. I love you guys because y'all some forgiving people and y'all have confidence. I just know that I prepare for whatever's gonna happen based on reality. And what I can say, the most two important assets that I can recommend to have is real estate and gold. Gold. Just get you some real gold and just put it on stash, because I'm gonna tell you, a couple of years ago when I was buying ounces of gold, the ounce of gold was $1,500, and now the ounce of gold is about $1,890. It is what it is, and this was like 3 years ago. It's big changes that happened. So try to invest little by little and hold it. Hold your assets while this market is fluctuating, and see what happened. So I love you guys and I appreciate you. I hope I wasn't silent for a long time. I hope I meant to be silent, because sometimes I say stuff when the video is playing and I don't want y'all to hear me just talking crap, because I'll be like, oh, I talk crap. So I was like, let me just mute myself. But I'm going to replay it. And if it's anything that I forgot or it kind of, went out of this, we'll re-talk about it. To the buyback team, I'm going to see you on Friday. We're going over Tennessee on Friday. Tennessee, y'all. Okay. Love you. Have an amazing week. Also, check us out on Clubhouse on Sunday. We start at 4 p.m. and we go for until I go live for my other broadcast. So we start at 4, and we're going to run to 7. We're going to go over these scam artists and the things that people are alleging. At least we just going to talk about it, right? Because I feel that these scam artists in the Black community are affecting the validity of my program, because I have been seen with some of these people, as well as once you lose confidence in particular practices, you start to look at everybody's side eye. So we don't want nobody to look at us side eye. Primetime homeowners are by themselves. I am my own, and we have no affiliations. So we're going to talk about that on Sunday on Clubhouse. I appreciate you guys. Please look in the description tomorrow for the Clubhouse link, or I'm going to try to do it tonight, okay? Put the Clubhouse link and put our other link to where we're at, because we're expanding off of YouTube, okay? I love you guys and have a beautiful night. Gotta go.